Right now, without ever touching your bank account, inflation is quietly stealing 7 to 10% of your money's value every single year. I've spent years studying where that value actually disappears to. And it's not an accident. It's a system governments and central banks depend on. And here's the part that shocks people most. Your regular savings account isn't protecting you. It's actually losing the race against inflation. But there's one specific type of asset that's quietly beaten inflation for decades, and I'm about to show you exactly what it is. Let's start with the basics, because most people think inflation just means things get more expensive. That's true, but it's not the whole story. Inflation actually means your money gets weaker. Here's a simple way to picture it. In 1960, if you had $100 in cash, that same $100 today would need to be worth over $100 just to buy the same amount of stuff. That's not a typo. Prices in the US have risen more than 1,000% since 1960. So if your grandfather stuffed $100 under his mattress in 1960 and you found it today, it wouldn't buy you what it used to buy him. It would barely cover a grocery run. This is what economists quietly call the hidden tax. Nobody votes for it. Nobody signs a form agreeing to it. It just happens year after year to every dollar sitting still. And here's the part most people never think about. Even in a normal, healthy economy, this erosion never stops. It's not a bug. It's baked into how modern money works. But this is where things start getting interesting. Because this erosion isn't an accident. It's happening on purpose. Stay with me, because what I'm about to show you is going to change how you look at your paycheck forever. Here's where it gets interesting. Inflation isn't just something that happens to an economy. In many ways, it's something that's managed, even encouraged on purpose. Central banks like the Federal Reserve actually set inflation targets. The Fed's long-standing target is 2% inflation per year. Not zero, not negative. 2% forever. Why would anyone deliberately aim for their currency to lose value every single year? Part of the answer is debt. Governments carry enormous amounts of debt. Inflation quietly shrinks the real value of that debt over time. It's like slowly paying back a loan with money that's worth less than what you borrowed. It's also used as a tool to encourage spending. If your money is guaranteed to be worth less next year, you're more motivated to spend or invest it now instead of hoarding it. And then there's the printing press. When central banks pump new money into the economy, think quantitative easing, more dollars start chasing the same amount of goods. That's a direct driver of inflation. So this isn't some rare accident, it's policy. But here's where it gets intense. Because policy has limits. And when those limits are crossed, this same safe 2% system can spiral into something that has completely destroyed entire currencies in a matter of months. Do not skip the next part, because this has actually happened multiple times in living memory. And it could show you exactly what's coming if this trend doesn't stop. Before we get to those extreme cases, let's ground this in real numbers, because the last few years have made inflation impossible to ignore. Over the past 20 years, US inflation has averaged around 2.5%. That sounds mild, but in 2022, it spiked to 8%. In 2023, it was still over 4%. As of mid-2026, the annual rate sits around 3.5%, with certain categories, like energy, swinging far more violently, at times rising more than 15% in a single year. Here's why that matters for you personally. If inflation runs at just 3% a year, and your savings account pays you 0.5% interest, you are losing roughly 2.5% of your money's real value every single year. Guaranteed whether the market crashes or booms. Compare that to money that's invested instead of sitting still, and the gap over 10 or 20 years becomes massive. Cash sitting in a low-interest account doesn't just fail to grow, it actively shrinks in what it can buy. But here's the thing. Everything you just heard is still normal inflation. What I'm about to show you next is not normal. This is where it gets intense, so stay with me. Because there are real countries where this same quiet process didn't creep along for decades. It exploded in a matter of months. And what happened to ordinary people's entire life savings in those places is almost impossible to believe. Let's talk about hyperinflation, because these stories reveal exactly where this silent theft leads if left unchecked. Weimar Germany, early 1920s. Monthly inflation peaked near 2,900%. Prices were doubling almost daily. People famously carried wheelbarrows of cash just to buy bread. and by the time they reached the store, prices had already gone up again. Zimbabwe, 2008. Monthly inflation hit an estimated 79.6 billion%. A banknote worth 100 trillion Zimbabwean dollars couldn't even pay for a bus ride. Food production had collapsed, unemployment hit 80%, and the government kept printing more money to cover its own spending. Venezuela, more recently, the IMF projected inflation would top 1,000,000% in a single year. An entire generation watched their savings, their pensions, their life's work evaporate, not over decades, but over months. In every single one of these cases, the pattern was identical. Governments printed money to cover debts, trust in the currency collapsed, and people's savings became worthless almost overnight. Now here's where this stops being a history lesson and starts being personal. In every single one of these collapses, there was one type of asset that never lost its value, while paper money burned to nothing around it. If you leave right now, you will miss the one part of this video that could actually protect your money. So stay with me, because I'm about to show you exactly what it was. The answer, across almost every hyperinflation in history, is gold. During the Weimar collapse, the price of gold and paper marks rose from 86 marks to roughly 87 trillion marks, while the paper currency itself became worthless. Gold didn't gain value out of nowhere. It simply held its value while everything else collapsed around it. But gold isn't the only option, and you don't need a hyperinflation crisis for this to matter. Historically, real estate and stocks have both outpaced inflation over long periods because property and business ownership tend to rise in price alongside, or faster than, the cost of living. Treasury inflation-protected securities, or TIPS, are literally built to adjust with inflation, so your return keeps pace automatically. On the other side of that line, cash sitting in a checking account, low-interest savings accounts, and fixed-income investments with low returns. These are the assets that quietly lose the race, year after year, even when nothing dramatic is happening in the economy. So now you know exactly what protects wealth, and exactly what slowly drains it. And this is where things get real, because in the next 30 seconds, I'm going to tell you which side of that line your money is sitting on right now. And if you don't like the answer, this is your one chance to actually do something about it before another year of your money quietly disappears. Here's the truth. Inflation isn't going away. It's not a temporary crisis or a passing headline. It's a permanent feature of how modern economies are run. Every year it sits still, your money quietly loses ground. But now you understand exactly how it works, why it happens, and, most importantly, which assets have historically protected people from it, even through the worst currency collapses in history. The only real decision left is this. Are you going to let your money keep losing this invisible race, or are you going to move it somewhere it can actually keep up? If this helped you see money differently, subscribe.